On my wedding day, my sister caused a scene. She hurled champagne, destroyed my cake, and screamed, "This is what you get for acting like you're better than everyone." My mom rushed to her saying, "She just needs to let it out," and embraced her. I didn't say a word. That evening, I did something unexpected. I revoked her college tuition deposit, froze the lease I had co-signed, and at 8:40 a.m. the next morning, they got the reality check. It's crazy how a single moment can change everything you thought was solid. August 3rd was meant to be the happiest day of my life. 43 guests, smooth jazz in the background. The venue lit perfectly, and my fiancée Emily looked like a dream come true. After years of hard work, consulting gigs, long flights, sleeping in airports, and being underpaid just to stay afloat, I had finally made it. I thought, for once, I had earned the right to celebrate. But Bethany didn't see it that way. She arrived late, which should have been my first sign. The ceremony had already concluded. She strolled in wearing a gold backless dress like it was prom night. She didn't greet anyone, didn't smile, just grabbed a glass of champagne and secluded herself in a corner. When our eyes met for a moment, she looked right through me like I was a stranger. To others, it might have seemed like she was just in a bad mood, but I knew better. That silence was just the beginning. 3 weeks before, she had called me in tears because her car had broken down again. She had already borrowed $1,200 from me in April for repairs. Now she claimed she needed an entirely new car, saying it was urgent. I refused, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I was tired of being her safety net. She wasn't even putting in the effort anymore, skipping classes, partying with people twice her age, and telling our parents she was finding herself. She hung up on me without saying goodbye. I didn't expect her to bring that energy to my wedding. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, like I always did. She waited until the toast. Just as I stood to thank everyone for coming, to talk about love and building a life with someone who brings you peace, Bethany stood up as well. For a split second, I thought she might offer a toast herself. My glass was still halfway to my lips. But then she threw it. The champagne flew through the air and exploded against the dessert table, shattering a photo frame of me and Emily on a cliff in Maui. Then, she grabbed the wedding cake and shoved it, as if she were flipping a table. The cake didn't just fall, it collapsed. 3 layers of intricate sugarwork, custom flowers, all of it smeared across the floor. She locked eyes with me and screamed so loudly that people outside the venue could probably hear it. "This is what you get for acting like you're better." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear someone's phone buzzing. Some guests looked around, wondering if it was all part of a staged prank. But it wasn't. My mom rushed to Bethany like she had just been attacked. "She just needs to let it out," she said, holding her like a war casualty. Emily's parents stared at me stunned. My best man didn't move. Even the DJ stopped the music. There was no apology, no remorse. Bethany didn't even cry. She just walked out like she had made her point. I didn't speak. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I wasn't about to let her turn my wedding into her courtroom. I smiled, exchanged a few soft words with Emily, and nodded to the coordinator. The rest of the evening limped forward. Some danced, others tried to ignore what had just happened, but there was no true recovery. The memory had already been stamped. At home that night, Emily was quiet. She asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I wasn't, but I focused on what needed to be done. As Emily changed out of her gown, I opened my laptop. I logged into the university portal and revoked the $9,400 tuition deposit I had made for Bethany last month. Then I went into the apartment's online portal, locked the co-signed lease account, and marked it for review. No approval, no rent payment. The lease was now frozen. Rent was due in 5 days. At exactly 8:40 a.m. the next morning, Bethany called. I didn't answer. She sent 3 texts. "What the hell? Why is the portal locked? I can't access anything. Did you do this?" I didn't respond because that morning wasn't the end. It was just the start. By the time Bethany sent her 6th text, the passive confusion was gone. The last one simply said, "Fix this." I muted my phone and made coffee. I didn't tell Emily right away, not because I was hiding anything, but because I wanted a moment to enjoy the quiet. The wedding was over, the chaos had passed, and for the first time in years, I wasn't her backup. Around noon, my mom called. I let it ring out. Then she left a voicemail. Your sister's very upset. She feels abandoned. Call me. The irony. She hadn't been abandoned when I co-signed the lease, paid her deposit, covered her overdraft fees, bailed her out of a botched Airbnb, or sent her $500 just to get by until Friday, only to be met with silence for weeks. No one called me then to ask how I felt. Bethany didn't speak to me for 2 days after the wedding. Then she showed up outside my apartment. Emily saw her through the peephole and didn't open the door. Bethany banged on it for about 10 minutes. Loud rhythmic knocks like a kid trying to start a fight. Finally, Emily cracked the door and asked what she wanted. Bethany didn't even say hello, just launched into demands. She said she had 5 days to pay rent and had already spent her summer job money. She was counting on the tuition deposit and told me I had no right to do this, that I had a moral obligation to follow through. Emily told her I wasn't home. That was a lie. I was in the living room, but I wasn't interested in speaking through a door. Not until she showed some sign of remorse, which she didn't. She left, shouting something about legal rights, saying I couldn't just take everything away without warning. But she was wrong. I checked the lease. I was the primary account holder. She was the resident. She had no legal say in it. I could pull the plug, and I had. 3 more days went by. She sent me an email titled, "Are you seriously doing this?" Inside, she laid out a full breakdown of her upcoming expenses, pleading for me to reinstate the tuition. She claimed if I didn't, she'd have to drop out for the semester, and that if she got evicted, it would be my fault. Then she tried to guilt-trip me, saying she ruined the wedding because she was overwhelmed, and that I was the only one in the family with real money. She said I was letting it go to my head. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded the email to Emily with a note. Your turn to read the circus. That's when Bethany escalated. She showed up again, waiting until Emily came home from work and trying to sneak in behind her. Emily didn't scream. She grabbed Bethany by the arm, dragged her into the hallway, and told her if she ever tried that again, she'd call the police. Then, without warning, Emily grabbed a fistful of Bethany's hair and shoved her down the hall. No drama, just raw force. Bethany screamed and stumbled, but Emily didn't flinch. She shut the door and locked it, like she was taking out the trash. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. It was my dad. He sighed before speaking. Look, we need to talk about your sister. I asked him what he wanted to talk about. He said she was spiraling and I needed to help her land. He said what she did at the wedding was just emotions, and that I shouldn't take it personally. He told me I was old enough to be the bigger person. I told him I'd already done that for years. He urged me not to punish her for a bad moment. I told him it wasn't a moment, it was a pattern. I hung up when he started talking about family unity, because at that point, I knew what neither of them had admitted. Bethany wasn't spiraling. She was finally falling. After Emily threw Bethany out, we didn't talk about it right away. It wasn't awkward. We just sat in silence. I poured her a glass of wine, and we sat together like nothing had happened. But I could feel something shift between us. Not in a bad way, more like something had settled. It was as if Emily had drawn a line in permanent ink, and there was no question about where she stood. Bethany didn't come back the following day, but she didn't completely disappear either. Instead, she started sending texts, but only to Emily, not me. Apologies disguised as guilt trips, little paragraphs trying to sound mature, yet always ending with something like, he owes me. Emily ignored it all, blocking her after the 4th message. But Bethany didn't stop there. She switched tactics and began texting our parents, claiming she was being physically attacked and treated like a stray dog by Emily. She made it sound as though she'd tried to reconcile, only to be ambushed. That's when the group chat was created. My dad added me, Emily, Mom, and Bethany into one chaotic conversation and typed, "Let's have an honest talk without yelling or blocking. We are still a family." Bethany chimed in first, saying she was hurt. She explained that her behavior at the wedding stemmed from feeling invisible, wanting someone to acknowledge how forgotten she was. She accused me of rubbing my success in her face for years. My mom jumped in next, saying it was time to forgive and move on while Bethany was still figuring herself out. She ended with, "She's still your baby sister." Emily left the chat. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed 3 sentences. She's not a baby. She's 22, and she needs to learn the cost of disrespect. There was silence after that. No one replied. No typing bubbles. Just a strange, digital tension that was louder than shouting. 2 days later, I heard from my cousin that Bethany had packed up and left her apartment. She couldn't pay rent or find a subletter. The lease company contacted me for the final paperwork, and I didn't argue. I signed it off, made sure my credit was secure, and moved on. But the kicker came a week later when Bethany enrolled back in school. Under my parents' name, not mine. Turns out they paid her tuition themselves. After all her complaining about money, about how we didn't have the same opportunities, they pulled out the money and paid it quietly. No announcement, no apology, just like it had always been an option. So they had the money. They just didn't want to spend it on her when they could pressure me to do it. I was done. I wasn't angry, just clear. That night, Emily and I sat on the balcony, drinking cheap wine and eating leftovers. I told her I felt like a decade-long weight had been lifted. She smiled and said, "Good. Now we can live." And for the first time, I truly believed her. About a week after Bethany officially left her apartment, things went quiet. No more angry texts, no surprise visits. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the storm had passed. Then my mom called. No hi or how are you? Just, "You'll be at your father's birthday next Saturday, right?" Like nothing had happened. Like my wedding hadn't been hijacked. Like my sister hadn't caused a scene that people were still talking about. I said I wasn't sure. She paused, then said, "Bethany will be there. I want you two to talk like adults. And I want you to stop being so cold." That hit me in a strange way. I was the cold one. Not the one who trashed a wedding cake and screamed in front of a crowd. Not the one who'd been living off me for the past 3 years, but the one who finally said enough. That's who they were mad at. I hung up without agreeing to anything. That night, Emily and I made dinner, and didn't even discuss the call until we were halfway through eating. She said we shouldn't go. I agreed. Then, the night before the party, something even more ridiculous happened. Bethany sent me a Venmo request for $1,800. Label for the cake and broken frame. Oh, let's just call it even. I didn't react at first. I just handed my phone to Emily and walked out to the balcony. When I came back, she had the calmest look on her face. I asked her what she wrote, and she shrugged, saying, "She's not going to like it." 15 minutes later, Bethany blocked both of us on everything. We didn't go to my dad's birthday party, but Bethany did, and she didn't come quietly. She showed up in a white jumpsuit that looked suspiciously close to bridal wear. Cousin Cara sent us a photo with a caption, "She's not okay." Apparently, she brought some real estate guy she'd met 2 weeks prior, and told half the guests they were moving in together soon. The other half she told, "Big things are coming." She kept repeating it, "Big things." That Monday we found out what the big thing was. Bethany launched a podcast titled Bloodline Bruises, Growing Up with the Golden Child. The teaser trailer dropped on Instagram and TikTok. In the voiceover she said things like, "I thought family meant safety, and sometimes the most toxic people are the ones you share a last name with." It felt scripted, so theatrical. But she wasn't done. At the end of the video, she thanked a sponsor, an app one had introduced her to a year earlier when she called me crying about a panic attack in a bar bathroom. She'd signed a real deal. They reposted her video, and she got over 10,000 views in 24 hours. People in the comments were calling her brave, asking for advice, saying they related. I didn't care about the podcast itself, but something about it unsettled me, like I was being slowly written into someone else's fiction. Then came the twist I didn't expect. She emailed me with the subject line, "Let's talk." The body was short. "I'd like to meet. No drama, just a conversation. I have things I want to tell you. I think you'll be proud of me." No accusations, no name calling, just calm, perfectly composed wording. It didn't feel like her at all. Emily read it twice and said, "She's not trying to fix anything. She's setting a trap." I replied with one line, Emily will be there too. She never wrote back. But I had a feeling this wasn't over. And I was right. 3 days after the email, my parents showed up at our apartment. No call, no warning. They just rang the bell at 7:15 p.m. while Emily and I were eating dinner. I opened the door just enough, not saying a word. My dad gave a small wave, as if this was a casual visit. My mom had her purse hanging from her shoulder, as though she intended to stay. She said, "We just want to talk calmly." I told them they had 3 minutes. They walked in anyway. Emily stayed in the kitchen, arms crossed, silent. She wasn't going to fake a smile. There was no need for that. Everyone knew where she stood. My mom spoke first. She said that Bethany was going through a transformative phase and had made mistakes she deeply regretted. She claimed the podcast was just Bethany's way of processing things, and that I shouldn't take it so personally. My dad added, "She wants to have a relationship with you. She just doesn't know how to express it." I asked if Bethany had actually said this, or if they were just hoping I'd believe it. They didn't answer. Then my mom said something that stopped everything in its tracks. She mentioned that Bethany had moved back in with them temporarily, until she figured things out. Emily exhaled sharply enough for everyone to hear. The full picture had now formed. They'd paid her tuition. They let her move back in. And now they were here, not to ask me for anything, but to make sure I didn't make things more difficult for her. They weren't mediating, they were managing. I asked them bluntly if they had ever told Bethany that what she did at the wedding was wrong. My mom claimed she was overwhelmed. My dad said Bethany didn't mean to ruin it. I asked again, "Did either of you ever tell her it was wrong?" They stayed silent. That said everything. They weren't angry with her. They were embarrassed. And the easiest way to ease that embarrassment was to shift it onto me. I told them I was done. Done with the money, the guilt, and the games. If they wanted to keep funding her life, they could, but not with my help. I told them they'd raised a daughter, who thought there were no consequences. Then I asked them to leave. They hesitated but eventually left. Bethany didn't reach out after that, but her podcast kept going. Episode 2 was about narcissistic siblings. Episode 3, When They Make You Look Crazy, had Emily and me laughing. A few days later, I checked the lease for our apartment. We had 8 months left. I looked at our savings, ran the numbers, and told Emily we should take a trip. Somewhere far, somewhere warm, somewhere completely disconnected from all of this. She smiled. The next morning, we booked 2 round-trip flights to the Maldives. We were leaving in 6 weeks. No family, no drama, just peace. Real peace. The kind you earn. The last message I received from Bethany came 2 days before our flight. It was just a fire emoji. No words, no context. It felt like some vague warning, or perhaps an attempt to remind me she was still watching. I showed Emily while we were picking up our luggage tags. She didn't react, just scanned her boarding pass and said, "Perfect. Let it burn." I blocked the number. That was the last loose end before the trip. There was complete silence from everyone else too. My dad didn't call. My mom sent one generic, "Hope you're well" text, which I ignored. No more lectures, no more guilt trips. I think they finally realized I wasn't going to fix what they broke. Not this time. We left for the Maldives on a Thursday morning. No layovers, no hurry. I watched Emily sleep against the window as we crossed endless miles of open water. And for the first time in years, my mind didn't feel like it was on fire. No calculations, no financial plans, no rescue missions, just quiet. Our bungalow was over the water. You could hear the ocean beneath the floorboards. There was a sign inside, "No clocks. Let time be yours again." That hit harder than it should have. We didn't talk about Bethany, not once. Not until day 4. We were having breakfast on the deck, listening to the waves and the birds. Emily asked, "Do you think they'll ever admit it?" I didn't need to ask who she meant. "No," I said. "But I think they know. And I really believe they do." Not in a conscious way, but in the quiet that settles in when your favorite scapegoat leaves for good. They know I was the one cleaning up her messes. They know they let it happen because it was easier than saying no. And they definitely know they can't reach for me like that anymore. Bethany stayed with them. She didn't find a new apartment. Her lease expired quietly, and the building relisted the unit without issue. I know because the management company contacted me for final signature confirmation. She never reached out about it. Never said thank you, never apologized. She never will. But I stopped waiting for that. I didn't need the apology. I just needed it to end. The podcast went on for 2 more episodes. One about being erased by your support system. Another about financial abuse in families. I didn't listen, but Kara did. She told me Bethany was stretching the truth so far it didn't make sense anymore. People stopped engaging. Comments slowed. Sponsorship disappeared. After that, nothing. The silence wasn't just online. It crept into real life too. I stopped checking her socials. My mom stopped sending passive-aggressive group texts. My dad didn't mention her the one time he called about a mechanic. Eventually, Kara told me that Bethany enrolled in part-time classes again, using my parents' money. Apparently, they dipped into a rainy day fund they'd kept for emergencies. I almost laughed. Turns out they had it all along. They just didn't want to use it. Not until I refused to. Emily and I returned to a different life. We moved to a better place, farther from the city, closer to peace. No more buzzing phones, no more split payments, just us. I got a new credit card, leaving my cosigner days behind. I even changed my bank account password for the first time in 6 years. No more surprise withdrawals. No more Venmo requests marked with, "Please don't ask." We don't talk about the wedding anymore. We don't need to. It's just a strange blip in a story that no longer belongs to us. Some nights, we sit on our new porch with wine and watch the neighbor's dog chase moths under the porch light. We talk about real things, books, trips, ideas, the business Emily's planning. That old life. It doesn't even feel like mine anymore. It's something I watched happen, something I closed the book on. Sometimes fire doesn't need to be fought. Sometimes you just let it burn itself out and walk away, finally warm.